And we are, oh, wrong button already. And we are recording with, is it Dr. John Barnwell?
No,
All right.
no
Well,
honorifics here.
no honorifics. Well, you do have your, for everybody listening, you should be watching. He has his CIA hat on. I have my late grandfather's Pentagon hat on. And cat's out of the bag, man. We do work for the military industrial complex. This entire podcast has been a psyop, and this is the last episode of the podcast as I bring on my handler and we drop the big truth bombs before we're both vaporized by a Hellfire missile. But Mr. Barnwell, please introduce yourself, man.
Well, my name's John Barnwell, and I'm in the Motor City. For those of you that don't know, that's Detroit, in the toxically blue state of Michigan at this point. It's questionable whether that's a reality or just a fictive. I mean, but nudge, nudge, say no more. But
Well,
anyways,
no, it's cool. We're permanently banned from YouTube, so it's cool. We can talk about things
okay.
like election fraud, Dominion machines. It's cool. I got booted, so it's free speech.
And but I've been chasing down rabbit holes, as they tend to call them today, for 40, 50 years. I ran the largest alternative metaphysical holistic bookstore in the world back in the late 70s into the early 80s. And after that, I went on and I put together, I was working in setting up a relational database for one of the largest esoteric libraries in the world by a wealthy friend of mine. And so that you could look up subjects and bring up what books referred to it and all that. So thousands of volumes went into that database. We took that data system, and her daughter was studying to be an Egyptologist and also could read cuneiform, Mesopotamian studies. And so I did I don't know, 15,000 volume database on ancient Egypt and Mesopotamian studies. And all the while, with my background in rare books, and I've been searching. I'm into these things that people might not be familiar with. They're called books, and
Spell it for me.
I can
Boox.
remember searching for a book several years at a time. I go through catalogs every week, A.B. Bookman's Weekly, and find items and finding items for customers. And I've seen so much that there isn't anybody that I can think of offhand that has as wide a context that I work from. I don't make any claims at expertise in specific disciplines other than the work of Rudolf Steiner and anthroposophy. That's my central focus, and it enables me to contextualize most anything. And given that his work is some over 6,700 lectures and 50 published books and articles and all of that, and it's the most difficult study that I know of. So that I've been spending, well, basically what I've been doing for most of my adult life is helping people come to an understanding of Rudolf Steiner's spiritual science. And there's a lot of other things I could add, because I'm also trained in other schools, in various martial arts, and I used to teach Kundalini yoga. And
Really?
well, I've been around a lot of gurus, spiritual leaders, teachers. They used to come to me because I ran the bookstore that was selling their books, and
Yeah.
so in all kinds of peculiar, more counterculture figures. Like I knew Timothy Leary quite well. I knew Baba Ramdas.
You knew Ram Dass. I was gonna
Yeah, I knew
ask you.
we used to do poetry readings, me and John Sinclair and
Bastard.
Howard Weingarten, and my associates with Douglas Gabriel and all of that over at American Intelligence Media, and his wife Tyla is a current endeavor that I've been involved with for the last few years, and we've been getting to primary documentation regarding all the things that are going on in the world, so that it's what we have together with the Americans for Innovation with Michael McKibben. We've posted primary documentations for all the things that we refer to regarding the senior executive service, the Crown, the Privy Council in England and their machinations within the U.S. Uh, colonies, as they like to think of us,
Yeah.
and so many other things that are hard to believe. And Michael McKibben, you need to know, is the inventor of social media. They stole it from him, and they gave it out as like open source. It was through the DARPA, whole DARPA.
Lifelog.
Yeah. It replaced that because
Yeah.
there was insoluble problems in social media at the time. There, you could only have 60 people in a conference at one time, and he figured out how to make it so that you could have unlimited number of people participating simultaneously, and they took it away from him. And he's a remarkable figure. So I'm honored to work with him and with Tyler, who's the kind of the mastermind behind American Intelligence Media, which is Aim for Truth. .com and numerous other platforms, and then Douglas Gabriel's my best friend, her husband, and he's written numerous books, as has she, and we're just all trying to come out, turn lemons into lemonade, shall we say?
Or as Ram Dass would say, we're all just walking each other home.
Yeah.
We're all just trying. It makes me so jealous. I've had on Dr. Eben Alexander, who wrote the book Proof of Heaven, Harvard neurosurgeon who fell into a coma in like 2010. He knew Ram Dass, a guy I have on every week. My friend Roger Williams, a sci-fi author, he met Timothy Leary. So I feel like I'm. It's kind of like I'm like uncovering like the root system. Like I'll never actually get to meet Ram Dass. I think he died like a day before I started this podcast, but it's always neat kind of uncovering these like veins that were connected
Yeah.
to him. I feel like this weird, and if you ask Ram Dass, where would I go? He doesn't die. He's like, if you meet a friend of mine, you meet me, in the way that only Ram Dass could say. Um, it is. This is kind of wasn't really kind of planning on taking this way, but isn't it odd how it seems like we have our like traditional um, figures of power, institutions of power, senior executive service. Right now, you would say Joe Biden. A year ago, you'd say Donald Trump, but Obama, Bush, whatever. You have presidents, you have queens, prime ministers, right? You have DARPA, you have the Pentagon, you have the CIA, you have the DOD, the MOD. You kind of have these institutions, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, yeah, right, Sandia, Los Alamos, whatever's going on at Groom Lake, and it's like you can't get near them, like they're physically protected. Then there's like intellectual protection, but then it also seems like there are these weird sort of almost like mirrors of knowledge, like Baba Ram Dass or Alan Watts. And it's like there's no concertina wire, there's no Delta Force protecting them. Alan Watts lived on a houseboat in Sausalito. Baba Ram Dass was out in Hawaii, just kind of sitting in the sand smiling. And the image of the guru sitting at top of the mountain, I don't think really fits. The guru is actually sitting on like a park bench. You can just walk right up to him. And myself, guilty of all of it, I always wonder, what's in the deep, what's in the NORAD bunker, what's in the most classified air gapped hard drive. And it's like the real kind of keys to the kingdom are just like, a guy sitting on the beach smiling, and it's Ram Dass. And there's this weird kind of mirror system of what we think is the most elite, what we think are the richest, the billionaires, the ones that are kind of diving into, transcendent technology, nanobots, uploading your consciousness, becoming gods and living forever, versus the guys that, Ram Dass, who, realize that you never die. You were never born. You're just here. And I don't really know where I'm going with this rant, but isn't it kind of odd how there's this weird mirror system of perceived power and intelligence, and then the real power and intelligence is just kind of sitting there on a park bench?
Well, it's kind of funny. To elaborate a little bit more on that, when I was teaching yoga, I used to do a weekly class with a group of doctors that were with Leary and Alpert at Harvard. right? And I do this yoga class with these interesting group of characters and
Yeah.
people there that lived in Greenwich Village back in the late 40s into the early 50s, and would go down and have a glass of wine and listen to John Coltrane, you know, and so a lot of connections. I've always respected my elders, and so I've had the good fortune of having really old people. I mean, when I was like at the bookstore, I'd go and have lunch with people that, were in their 70s or 80s. Those were the people that interested me.
Yeah.
Like I used to have lunch with Pat Flowers, and he's like one of the leading pianists. He played piano for Billie Holiday in
Oh,
France, when he was
shit.
17 years old. So
Shit.
it's interesting. I'm just interested in interesting people, but I've focused more and more over the last few years on the spiritual aspect of it, because that's really what this is all about in my take on reality, is that all this other stuff out here, all these people wrestling for power, that's mammon, that's the prince of this world. And Jesus Christ said, my kingdom is not of this world.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's where I want to be.
Yeah.
See? And so, but I'm very much into freedom. I'm what Goethe called the Hypsisterian, a person who respects a contribution by anybody of any background, whether they be pagan, Christian, Muslim, shaman from Siberia. I really, that's not my thing in trying to convince people to think like me.
Hmm.
Although it would be nice if they'd understand me, and as Rudolf Steiner said, a healthy suspension of disbelief. Just see if you can follow my line of thinking, and if it makes
Yeah.
sense for you, good. If it doesn't, okay, that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Voltaire, right? The sign of an intelligent man is right. Entertain an idea without necessarily believing it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Play with
right.
it.
And when I talk, that's an important point, because when I talk about somebody like Leary, doesn't mean I endorse him.
Sure.
First of all, he was working for CIA. So
Yeah.
was, yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm wearing his hat for that.
Yeah. Right. I
So
mean,
that's
it's
because
he's peace,
I
love, and
found it
it's
in a
like
retail
he was an
store,
agency boy. Yeah. He was a company.
And
Yeah. It's
I took him to Greektown one time, and we spent like 3 hours talking about all of that, all the interlocking puzzle pieces.
yeah.
So he's a wonderful soul. He was very, very honest. But I
Sure.
remember the second time I spoke to him, we called him because we were going to bring him in to speak, because he made an announcement that he was going to do a tour, and we called him up, and we're talking to him from the bookstore, the Mayflower Bookshop near Detroit, and said, "Yeah, we bring in a lot of different spiritual teachers to lecture." And he says, "I'm not spiritual. I'm scientific." And I said, "Okay,
Uh,
fine."
blink twice if your handler's there, Timothy. Yeah. Hey, don't say it's a spirit. You got a gun to his head. Don't say spiritual. We're gonna lose our funding. It's scientific. It's scientific. DOD is watching, baby. Yeah.
But see, I'm into spiritual science, so
Yeah. Sure.
again, yeah, if you can read Fichte, you can understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And because if you're not working with a threefold model of the universe, you then you have these insoluble problems. Everybody's got this good versus evil thing going on, and that's a puppet show. The
Yeah.
real key is equilibrium
Yeah.
between materialism and immateriality. Satan is the materialism, and Lucifer is the immateriality. Lucifer's saying, none of this matters, get out of here. And Satan's saying that's all a hallucination, forget about it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so yeah, the Christ principle is finding an equilibrium between those two extremes. Because without that materiality, we wouldn't have a skeleton to walk the earth,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And without the levity, the immateriality, we need that to balance it out. But what balances it out is that principle that's clearly represented in the Gospel of St. John. In the first 14 verses, he tells you straight up, and so that's kind of like what my path of destiny is at this point. What you could call is esoteric Christianity.
It is that's kind of like it's the ultimate red pill, right? Is realizing that there isn't good doesn't win out over evil, or I want all pleasure and no pain, like the ultimate realization. Like I meditate every day. Doing it for 13 years, still have no idea what I'm doing, but it's it's kind of what you realize is when it like zooms all the way out and you really slow down, you you can't excise any of it. The the steaming hot summer days when excuse my French, when your balls stick to your leg and your shirts are sweating and you can't breathe walking up the stairs. That's what makes you yearn for a December 2nd day. And then it's a December 2nd day when the sun sets at 4 p.m. and it's cold and it's windy. It makes you start to yearn for that hot summer day. It's I wake up every morning, I go to the gym, I take a cold shower, I meditate, and then I do the podcast. And I love it. And I'm listening to audiobooks, and I'm talking to badasses like yourself, get to goof off, wear hats. And it's this, I love it. And I'm working hard. But after like 4 or 5 days, like, man, I start to get tired. So I take a day off. I get a little beer. I order a pizza. I play some video games, and I melt my brain in front of an Xbox. No intellectual stimulation, no meditation. I'm not learning about the Cold War, no growth. And I can do that for about 12 hours plus a long sleep, 24 hours. That then creates the desire to go to the gym and to eat clean, eat broccoli and chicken, and take cold showers and meditate and work. And it's this in for a long time, you always think that you're about to find it. You're, as Ram Dass used to say, he's like, doesn't it always seem like it's just right there? Let's get in a hot tub. And this is to quote Ram Dass directly, one of his lectures. Let's get in a hot tub. Okay, this is good. You know what would really make this good? Put on some music. Ooh, now we're grooving. You know what? What if we had some champagne? All right. What if we maybe smoke a little cigarette, smoke a little pot? What if we get a sexual partner? All right, now we're grooving. What if we go to dinner though? Oh, let's go get a big dinner. After the dinner, let's go get an ice cream cone. Ice cream. Let's go to the movies. You go to the movies after the movie. How about a slice of pizza? Let's go home. Let's make love. Let's watch late night TV. Let's go to sleep. It's always, it's just right. It's right there. You're almost so close. And 10, 20, for me, 31 years pass. And it's always right and just right out of grasp. And you start to wonder, can it ever be grasped? And if the answer is yes, it's because you've grasped it all along. The duality is doing this. I'm doing this podcast. Later tonight, I'm going to play some video games. When I'm playing the video games, I start to think I want to be working. I want to be listening to audiobooks. I want to be doing podcasts. When I'm working and doing podcasts, after, I'll do 1, 2, 3 in a day. By the third one, I'm like, man, I'm ready to turn my brain off and play some video games. And it's this, you start to realize that like not one, when one end of the seesaw isn't better than the other. It's, if you're walking between the twin towers on a tightrope, the right side and the left side aren't better. It's about finding it right along the wire. And if you can do that, well, then you have a view from the height of the twin towers versus I kind of, is that what you're saying? Am I touching on it?
Yeah, yeah. Again, if you allow yourself to enter into the proper mood of soul when one meditates, that enables you to, through the principle of awe and reverence, uh, bring about, it's called catharsis. And essentially, you've heard about the chakras and all of that, but what is that? Well, those are astral centers. Your astral body is that vehicle that you share with the animal kingdom, and you have an etheric body that you share with the plant kingdom, and you have a physical body you share with the mineral kingdom. And you are an individual ego,
Mm-hmm.
and that ego dwells in the warmth of the blood. And it was received through Christ, and it's through that principle that you come into relationship with what we call the macrocosmic ego, which is the Christ. But Christ is always there, but he's working unconsciously, because if he came in and just took over and you always did good things, but you'd just be a marionette.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be you uh, evolving into what Rudolf Steiner described as the principle, the spirits of freedom and love. And so it's that that whole delicate balance that's being enacted. But it's up to you to come to it of your own free will and accord. Not that you're doing it because you don't want somebody to cut your head off. It's like, and so you don't want to violate other people's freedom in your pursuit of that path and become some kind of bizarre fanatic. So it's a delicate balance, breath by breath. But if one approaches it in the right way, then you'll see that well, like Goethe said, the eye was created by light to receive light. See, and so when you allow uh, a supersensible activity to take place in you, even studying mathematics, that's essentially supersensible, working through mathematics. You're creating a sense-free activity. And in Rudolf Steiner's, really, it's his fundamental work, what was originally called the philosophy of freedom, but it's called the philosophy of spiritual activity. It's like a symphony in that the path of developing sense-free thinking is laid out, but it's like a symphony. You can't just take all the parts and move them all around. You have to follow the progression of ideas. But if you do that, it will bring you to a certain state of catharsis, to where the chakras that I referred to earlier, you have everything you need. It just has to be orchestrated. It's like, at the beginning of the symphony, you got everybody's tuning up and it's all this noise and all of that, and then the conductor, he taps his baton and everybody goes quiet, and all of a sudden there's all this beautiful harmony, right? And so it's everything you have is already there. It's just you have to, through this catharsis, get the things out of the way that are preventing you from finding clarity.
It's kind of like it's like a Thanksgiving meal, right? People are showing up, there's stuff in the oven, but you can't eat it just yet. And everything's moving around. The dinner table's being made. Everyone come in for dinner, say grace, and then everyone's served, and then it's right, and then it's just the full. You get to receive it all. You get to eat the stuffing and the pie, but it's this weird, yeah. You building it up slowly, building it up slowly, and you're right. You can't jump around with it. You can't. I often think, how come I couldn't have realized this 10 years ago? How much easier would my life be if I realized this at 21? That like doing the podcast and exercising and eating healthy versus drinking some beer and playing some video games and snoring, that it's not one or the other, but it's the dance between the two. How come I couldn't have realized that 10 years ago? How much more at peace would I be? Well, it's the 10 years of kind of BS that gets you here. You can't. I had on Tucker Max, who is this party animal dude, and he wrote a book. I hope they serve beer in hell. And in college, every guy read it. It was all just about his sexcapades and just being a bro. And that was like 13, 14 years ago. But I interviewed him like 2-3 months ago after he got into like psychedelics and meditation. And now he's got a wife and he's got like a couple little kids, and he's talking about like healing trauma. And you're like, what happened to like, how did, but he said, he's like, don't chastise the path that got you to the summit. Don't hate how you got there. And I often look at that and I think about that, like there is no shortcut. Like I have to do all these little things. I have to become, you've got to get wrapped up in politics. You've got to get wrapped up in sex. You've got to get wrapped up in working out. You've got to get wrapped up in popularity, right? You've kind of got to, you've got to go into all these mirages of, ooh, when I get that, I'll be happy, to, by the fourth or fifth or sixth one. In middle school, I took several years and got really good at basketball. High school, I took several years, got really good at working out. College, I took several years and studied and got into medical school. I kept doing all these things, and you always think this is the one. Once I master this, then I'll be happy. But really, it's sort of a system of systems. You look back and you go, oh, it was that false pursuit of all these end games that by the fourth or fifth one, you finally start to sit back and you're like, the hell am I doing? Like, what am I really doing? And it's, maybe I just have to sit here with a Pentagon hat and talk to you with a CIA hat. And Maybe this is it. Like this is, as again, as Ram Dass says, this is it. And if this isn't it, there isn't any. It's just here. And it's the whole dance, the navigation, the beginning of the song, the end of the song, the middle, the guitar solo, the badass drum. You can't have any one part of it, right? You can't, it's all, you can't have Christmas without the 4th of July. You can't appreciate winning the championship unless you've also had it stolen from your fingers, right? You can't appreciate a healthy relationship unless you've been in a bad one. You can't appreciate falling in love unless you've, had to go through the withdrawals of losing love. It's and then what do you do once you do realize that? I'm asking you, Mr. Barnwell. What do you do once do you just observe and ecstatic bliss?
Well, uh, it's a question of rhythm, and so in the Rosicrucian path, you know, early in the development of Christianity, as we moved into what they in history books they always call it the Dark Ages. You know, it was like that was the time in which people that did things and they didn't know any better or something. They just gave it a bad rap. But see, at that time, leading up to a critical point at 333 AD in the 4th century, they started outlawing the modalities, the Christian modalities that were present in the early uh, centuries that had to do with more of a metaphysical approach to the understanding of Christ, because you still had the remnants of the ancient clairvoyant cultures from the pagan lands, and you had the esoteric teachings of the Old Testament teachers in Judaism. And so there was all these elements that were active within early Christianity that all of a sudden Christianity morphed into this version of the Roman Empire, and it became a legal system. And and you don't want to look bad on that, because like what you're saying, the path is the path. It's just it was time for that to happen because people had to be experiencing themselves as separate beings, that they were not just a member of a family, that they were not just a member of some group, but we had to individuate. But now that we've gotten to this later stage of development, now it's time for us to unfold this individuation, which has to do with re-entering into that spiritual realm and being able to integrate that into our lives. But we can't go be monks like, uh, Saint Anthony in the desert or something. Some people can, good for them. That path is still available, but that path is one path. The other path has to do with the Rosicrucian stream, which is to where you set aside a portion of your life to do your spiritual work, and then you have to do your work in the world. But I guarantee you, if you make progress in your meditative task, that you're going to lose interest in certain things, let's just say, because you kind of tend to outgrow things. Your taste in music might change, the kind of people that you associate with. But it's all here. I mean, as the German Romantic poet that was contemporary with Johann Wolfgang von Goethe and Beethoven and that whole fascinating period, he said, paradise is strewn everywhere. And so it's like all here, it's like that motorcycle that you want exists, but it's not in your garage. So
Yeah.
it's that whole carrot on a stick. There's always another little worldly thing that you can keep yourself preoccupied with. There's always going to be that. So then why worry about it? It's not going to go away. And
Yeah.
and meditation has to do with the cessation of the modifications of the mind, according to the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, right? The ancient Indian meditative text. And I don't think anybody's improved on that statement. Meditation is the cessation of the modifications of the mind. It's allowing consciousness to exist without trying to control it, but to focus it it is a control, but it's a self-control.
Yeah. That's a brilliant statement. Meditation is the cessation of the modification of mind.
Yeah.
But it's
See,
because
a statement like that, in the right instance, it's all context, could bring you to enlightenment in an instant. It's
just
possible.
oh yeah, right.
And when I experienced enlightenment, I was what 18 years old, my first nodal return, lunar node return, and I didn't know anything about it. The only person I could talk to about it was my grandma.
Yeah.
She was born back in 1888, but she knew exactly what it was. She said, "But you're too vain." I said, "Yeah, probably, but
Yeah.
it's what happened,
Yeah.
But see, I'd had this kind of a spiritual culture coming out of I was brought up Catholic, and my great grandfather was the guy who owned the construction company that built Henry Ford's Highland Park plant, the first
Oh, holy crap.
production. And he did like the cathedral and Catholic schools and churches and all of that. Well,
Hmm.
he died, and we're Irish, and so they had a wake, and he was laying in the bed, up in the bedroom, dead, and all these people, Fords and Dodges, and all these important people in Detroit are showing up to pay their respects. And his mentor shows up, which is, I got his picture here. He's a wonderful being, but that's,
Okay.
get the glare off. That's Father Solanus Casey.
Okay.
And he went upstairs, and after 5 minutes, my great grandfather yells out, "Get me a glass of water." And he came back from the dead. So that's like kind of one of the earliest stories that I can remember hearing from my mom and my grandma and my aunts, and because they all knew about it, and it was a real moment for everybody that was there, the Fords and Dodges included, and it, with that kind of a thing, it made perfect sense to me as a small child because I was young enough to not be corrupted by the world to be sarcastic and to be so incapable of conceiving of it. So that's something that I'd always carried with me. And but my grandma lived to be 100 years old. She died in 1988, bless her soul. But she was the one person when this thing happened to me when I was 18 years old that I could talk to. I didn't know anybody. I couldn't find any books. Finally, I found the Tibetan Book of the Dead, stuff like that. And then eventually other people came along, but it was interesting that it was the most profound thing that ever happened to me, and that nobody ever told me there was such a thing, and so, but if you go to scripture, you find it there. Jesus says, "If therefore thine eyes be single, thy body shall be filled with God's light." And that's it in a nutshell. He says it right there. And that's the challenge of scripture is like when you get like Hegel, for example, he talks about how no matter what level you're at, it's there for you. And that's why some of the smartest people that you're ever going to find concern themselves with studying scripture. I mean, like they did a study of IQs at Harvard University, the professor who developed the IQ tests, and they did a study of historic figures, and they came up with the three highest estimations of IQ was Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, and then there was Manuel Swedenborg, and then there was what's his name, John. The My mind is slipping right now. I have him around here. Yeah. Anyways, he's one of the pragmatists, but I don't know why I'm not thinking well on that. But he's not important in this dialogue anyway. So that you have two out of the three of those people, John Stuart Mill, who's a brilliant guy, but two out of those three are esoteric. Emanuel Swedenborg and Johann Wolfgang von Goethe are both occultists, and John Stuart Mill, he probably was very familiar with it, even though he didn't get into it because he read everything, And so, why are the smartest people associating themselves with ideas regarding the supersensible? See, that's the key. And studying it, oh, you're gonna get it wrong, you're gonna make mistakes. Riddle Steiner is very clear. It's the aspiration, the purity of your intent that's what leads you along. Not that you've got you dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's, because as time it'll unfold. And so that's like in my podcast, I always say that all I'm trying to do is help people improve their questions.
It's like as you can kind of see it though, right? I mean, you can kind of catch glimpses of it, like Albert Einstein. I think one of his lesser known quotes is like, once you accept that the universe is something expanding into nothing, then you don't care about wearing stripes with dots. Like, it's like, what, even even Richard Alpert, when you go and you read, I mean, we all know Ram Dass, but I mean, his entire come up story was like, this is a brilliant guy. This was like a young Harvard phenom. He was the empire builder. I mean, and what does he eventually realize? Like, sitting all alone. I know I've quoted him like 100 times, but another one is, when I was all alone in the bathtub at night and I had no one's eyes to look into to tell me how great I was, I always wondered, is this enough? And you do kind of glimpse that when you find these guys that have climbed the highest rungs. They inevitably start to lean into spirituality, trying to find something more. And I don't think it's like a desperate last grasp for fulfillment, so much as it does kind of seem like the thing that your mind eventually goes to. I mean, I remember like 3 years into meditating. I never really knew what I was doing. I wasn't intending to meditate. It was just something I kind of ended up doing. I don't even remember really how. But I remember the first time I had sort of like a breakthrough experience where it wasn't just, this kind of calms me down, but rather like a psychedelic dive into my soul, like, and really seeing like a different side of life, like going from the second dimension to the third dimension. It was all of a sudden, it was just this new universe. And I had no idea who to talk to about it. I remember I went and talked to like my biology professor. This was in college. This is my sophomore. And I was like, when did like apes become conscious? When did become self-aware? And he was giving me all these answers about like brain development through evolutionary history. And I was like, no, like, yeah, sure. No, I get that. Talking about like neurons and stuff. But I was like, what is, and I remember, and eventually I remember going and asking like a neuroscience professor. I was like, what is I? Like, what is, and this is a guy, and I remember he looked at me and he goes, after college, and he was, at the time he was in his 60s, but he's like, after college, I took several years of soul searching. And he's like, I can tell you, Tommy, he was like, the answer you're looking for is not in a textbook. He was like, you're not going to find it. You can't, it's not written on paper. It can't be. It's experience. And kind of by accident, I ended up having to read part of the Bhagavad Gita for like it was like an elective class. I was a pre-med bio major, but I had to take Religions of the World 1006 or whatever it was. Going through, you have to read you got to write up a pair. It was just it was literally a homework assignment. And I remember like reading through it, just kind of, I vividly remember like sitting in my room in the fraternity house in 2011. I was reading through it, and it was talking about like meditation. It was, it was like, sit on a deerskin mat, not too high and not too low. Like, focus on your breathing. The heart, the chest goes up and down. You go in, and it was like, you find your emotions, and behind your emotions are your thoughts, and behind your thoughts are you, and behind your you is I, and behind I is the self. And there in that, and I was like, brilliant. I was like, finally, someone else gets, like, this is what, and I was like, who wrote this? I was like, this is, thinking I'm gonna find the author, realizing what the Bhagavad Gita was. And I was like, oh, this is thousands of years old. But there's this weird, you do have these moments where you're like, there's no one to talk to about it. You're like, what did I just, I mean, I can only imagine it would be like getting abducted by a UFO. You're like, who the hell do I even begin to broach this subject with? But yeah, you eventually find it. And isn't it called, was it a cone, Koan? Isn't that the thing that's supposed to
Yeah,
snap you into enlightenment?
koan. Yeah.
Koan, yeah. Yeah, it was, uh, there's like I think Alan Watts gave a lecture once. And it's like a teacher like tells a student, what's the one tenet of Buddhism or something. And the kid would always say it, and he'd be like, no, there's no tenants, and he would close his fingers, and the kid would, I'm butchering it, but the kid like raise a finger and go, no, this is the tenet of Buddhism. And so finally the kid came back one day and like put his finger down and goes, that's the tenet of Buddhism. And the teacher said no. And so the kid put up his finger, and then the teacher grabbed his hand and chopped off his finger with a knife. And he goes, what are the tenets of Buddhism? And he went to hold it up, and then he had enlightenment. It broke him. It cracked him. It's dividing by zero, right? It's all of a sudden the system just implodes on itself. And I've yet to experience that. I think probably the closest I got was 10 minutes ago with you. You know, meditation is the cessation of the modification of mind. That's that's what it is, though. You're no longer yearning for this, that, or the other thing. You just you are.
Yeah, that's that catharsis.
Yeah.
It's the purification of the chakras in the astral body. The astral body, when you purify the astral body, you develop what's called in India manas, which is like the higher mind, which in esoteric Christianity we would call that the Sophia. That's the wisdom aspect, and that has to do with the brow chakra, two-petaled lotus, and the focal point of your I or ego. I am the I am is right between there, right? And then, but when you take that experience, that can bring you into an awareness of the world that you existed in before you were born. See, and if you go back into the old early periods of the Christian development, before the 4th century, there were people that still had a memory of a relationship to the realm of the supersensible. And so you have all these legends about like going into battle, and a leader, one of the ancient leaders, is leading the charge, but he died, like 200 years ago. And you find all these kinds of stories, and you think, well, why would they make that up? Because
Yeah.
that's that whole, like in the Valhalla thing with the Vikings, is that the warriors of Valhalla, they were a part of their company. It's that whole connection thing to that which is not visible to the physical senses, you see, because there's different modalities from the ancient world. Whereas in the ancient mysteries, they would take you into a temple and they'd put you into a trance for 3.5 days or so, and they would lift your astral body and ego out, and loosen your etheric body, and bring you into an experience where you would actually meet the Logos, you'd meet the Christ, see, and then they'd bring you back, and you would have a memory of that. And people had gone through the complete experience of that. They were called fathers, and that they had that stage of initiation, right? But see, as we entered into the incarnation of Christ, he brought a new element into the picture, in that he became human. And so the dove descended at the baptism, and the Logos entered into Jesus, and he was different after the baptism, you see. But he doesn't want to commandeer your operating system. He wants you to develop on your own and freely come to understanding that God is love. And there's no easier way to do that than to be able to reverently meditate and bring about a cessation of the modifications of the mind. In the right, but it's the mood of soul. See, that's the throat chakra. That's the 16-petal lotus, the eightfold path of the Buddha, because the Buddha was the one who was the first who really presented the whole doctrine of compassion, right? And you have Krishna. That was at the beginning of Kali Yuga, and so you have the death of Krishna's the beginning of Kali Yuga. The end of Kali Yuga was in 1899. So it's time for us to begin to wake up out of our slumber, see, and to be able to come to a cognitive experience of the spiritual world. And so you have Atma, Buddhi, which is the principle of compassion, which is that what you can fashion out of the etheric body. This is what you fashion out of the astral body. And when you start to bring about the catharsis, the astral body can bring an imprint into the etheric body, and you develop your super sensible being. And those are those people that you see walking around who have that radiance around their body. They're beginning to do that. Of course, if you take it to the next stage where the Atma dwells, that's the heart, that's the force that actually moves your blood. That's the transformation of the physical. That's like high initiates, like the Comte de Saint Germain, people like that. They're, you know, you can worry about that later on. That's a later stage of development. But the whole purpose of him coming here was to go through the crucifixion and then the resurrection, so that the New Jerusalem's already here. It's a state of consciousness.
Yeah.
It's not
It's not a place.
we got to go build a
Yeah.
new city,
Yeah.
have elevators and
Yeah. We gotta go.
trains.
We gotta go landscape it and put in some roads. Like no, no, no. Yeah.
It's already here. It's just a question of, do we have the consciousness to be able to be a participant in that amazing event? And that's the point of the book of Revelation. It is, and Saint John was the disciple whom Jesus loved. He was the deepest of the disciples. See, and so in the Gospel of John and in the book of John and the Apocalypse, you're going to get the initiation teachings in their purest form. You see, and the other Gospels they're all important, but it's like giving different facets of the story. So. And they still understood this when they built the Gothic cathedrals. And so you'll see these portrayals of the Gospels. And so John is the eagle, and that's like the constellation of Scorpio, right?
Mhm.
And then you have the bull, and that's Taurus, right? And that's the Gospel of Luke with the simple shepherds, right? And then you have Mark, that's the lion, see? And then you have, and that's Leo. And then you have the Gospel of Matthew is the symbol of the angel or the upright man, right? And so that's Aquarius. Those are the four fixed signs of the zodiac. And I'm not making this up. I mean, you can go look it up in medieval sources. These are things that there was a star wisdom associated with this whole mystery, and that's basically in my books. That's what I lay out, is the whole the structural basis of the sevenfold mystery as it relates to the 12-fold modalities of thinking. And it enables you to be able to maintain a relationship to these understandings, the seven moods of soul and the 12 modalities of consciousness. It's like a mandala system. That's the Christian esoteric mandala system, and you can find it expressed in the cathedrals. And it was a wisdom that was carried through the Grail mysteries to the Knights Templar, to the true Rosicrucian order. But it leads back to Dionysius the Areopagite, who was the first bishop of Athens, and he's mentioned in Scripture that St. Paul, he converted him, and they established an esoteric school there. And you see that the Celestial Hierarchies was the book written by the successors of Dionysius, the Areopagite. That's where you get your doctrine of the angels and the archangels and the archai and the exousiai and the dunamis and the kuriotetes and the thrones and the seraphim and the cherubim. That whole system of angelology, that is esoteric Christianity. See?
What you talked about with the ancients bringing them into the like the inner sanctum, right? And they lift you out and they bring you back down. And you're talking about the individuals with the people always wrote about that was something about Baba Ram Das's. It was like you walk into a room and it was like walking into a room with a fireplace. You're just like, who is this The only person I can ever really think about that is Father Monsignor Lopez, as you. I'm an Irish Catholic guy, but went to Catholic school all my life, and I remember Monsignor Lopez, still alive. Well, he was getting up there in years, but he's a priest at St. Pius X Catholic High School in Atlanta, where I went to high school. Monsignor Lopez was someone, or even back when I was a stone cold materialist atheist, even when he would walk into a room, despite being like an 18-year-old angsty, just kind of jerk, he would walk into a room, and I swear it was like someone brought in a space heater. You just kind of like felt it. I mean, like truly, like I can feel it now, and I'm thinking about it. Like you could almost feel it on your skin, right? When in like the spring when it's still kind of cold, but it's also kind of turning into summer, and you walk outside, and in the shadows it's still cold, and then you walk out in the sun, and then all your hairs stand up, and it's like that's kind of what Monsignor Lopez felt like when he'd walk in. It was just enough to kind of pull you out. But the point is so there does seem to be like an actual thing, and it's not just my reports, and it's not just people talking about Ram Dass. He would talk about it with who is his guru, Neem Crowley Baba. He would talk about it. You meet, and it said it's just light coming out of the forehead, and it's not like you walk into a dark room and it lights up, but it's something you perceive. It is an aura. That kind of makes me think of, I know I've quoted him 1,000 times, but I guess this is just what this podcast is quoting Ram Dass. They said, no matter how high you are, no matter how one you are with God, it's no reason to not know your postal code. And it was just this kind of like, we're here, we're experiencing God, but like, I mean, after this podcast, I gotta do my laundry. Like I gotta pay rent. Oh shit, today. No, I did pay rent already. I just had a heart attack. You got to pay rent. And it's like meditate and become one with, the innermost self that is all of existence, which is nothing but love. But I also got to go get groceries at Walmart. And it's, for me at least, I've found for a long time, you want to push the physical world away, right? At first, that's all the enticement there is. I want sex, I want food, I want drink, I want sleep, I want a hot shower. And then as you slowly start to dip your toes into meditation, you start to view all this as bad, right? Which is just kind of another stepping stone along the way of realizing duality. But you push it away, and eventually it's starting to dawn on me that like the physical world isn't just like a stepping stone. It's not something to be pushed away. It's not something that it gets in the way, and it can seem like that, but it seems to be an inseparable part of this whole journey. It's, step 2 is no better or worse than step 1 or step 3. They're all connected. And it's, I can't do this podcast without the microphone, but I also can't do it without the camera, and I also can't do it without the light. It's all wrapped in. So kind of what I'm getting at with, bringing them into the temple, lifting them out, and then putting them back in. Ram Dass talking about the light, Monsignor Lopez, the light, and the whole, you still got to know your postal code. Could you maybe shed some light onto that for me, no pun intended, about how the physical world isn't something to be pushed away? Is it something to just be learned from, or is it something that you go out and then you bring something back down, right? And now you have this thing, and it leaves an imprint. We don't just send satellites up to take pictures of communist North Korea. We take the pictures, and then we use that as actionable intelligence. We do something on the ground with it, right? You go up with reconnaissance, you find the target, and then you send in the guys and blow them up, right? I'm not even sure what quite I'm asking, but could you kind of go into that more? The whole, you experience this thing, and then you bring it back down, because right, it makes sense, right? The Bodhisattva comes back and teaches everyone. But if the mystics bring you into the temple and raise you out, and you get to meet Christ, well, why the hell would you want to come back? Well, sure, you can come back and share what you know, But why would you even want to come back? Like, you just experienced paradise. You just experienced like the kingdom of jewels. Well, what am I going to come back and do my podcast better? No, screw the podcast, screw the physical form, forget sex and showers and Big Macs. Like, yeah, at least, and this is just in my limited mind. If I went and met Christ, or if I went and experienced this, sure, you could come back and use those teachings, but why would you want to come back at all? I know whenever I meditate and reach that purely peaceful world, sure, I can come back and use that. But if I had my druthers, I would never come back. It's bliss, it's heaven. Why would I even want to come back? Is that just part of the learning process? Am I still clearly in like the student process?
Well, I mean, it brings to mind, I was one of the first people to meet with the Dalai Lama when he came to America for the first time. And I introduced him to Thomas Binyakia, the spokesman for the Hopi elders, the Hopi Indians down in Four Corners. And he's an extremely interesting group. They're the record keepers of the Indians of North America, a branch of the Toltec. And I had discussed with Thomas about, according to my understanding from esoteric, so my sources, that the Toltec were from Atlantis. He said yes. He said the other tribes, they came across Alaska and came down from Asia, and we taught them how to grow corn. And so, and the prophecy of the Hopi tablets is something that we're really going through right now at this time to a large extent, because he says there's two really ways in which it can go. And to get in back to your point though, because it's so easy for I got
Oh
so
no,
many
hold on.
stories.
I kind of want you to
Some
keep
other
going on
time
that.
we'll,
All
we'll
right,
go
we'll go.
down that
Let me make it.
rabbit hole.
Let me make a note of that, because you were just pulling me in with that, the Hopis, and we'll do that. That will be the next podcast.
Okay.
Hopis, two paths.
Because I really
Striking.
haven't done a more complete discussion of that
Okay.
specific topic
Okay, I made a note of it.
elsewhere. And but with the Dalai Lama, he's a Gelugpa Tibetan Buddhist, right? He's head of the Gelugpa order. In that tradition, you have what's called Chenrezig, or in Sanskrit, Avalokiteshvara. And that's the whole concept of compassion. The why would you come back? Well, for the liberation of all sentient beings, that you want to bring to consciousness others. Because again, God is love, right? Well, without others, where's this love thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're just going, oh, well, I just want to liberate well, that's like what's called Hinayana, is that you just want to go into ultimate nirvikalpa samadhi, and you've transcended everything, and you're just all by yourself or something like that. I mean,
But
really, that's in a way misunderstood also, because that's not really the case, because this whole concept of the Dharma is within Tibetan Buddhism, and Douglas is even more conversant about this than I. He studied with Gelek Rinpoche. Gelek Rinpoche is a very good friend of mine. We used to play chess. He was one of the principal teachers of the Dalai Lama, and he was a remarkable soul. But they have a very pure teaching, but it's important to remember that the transmission that he's carrying was before Christianity. And I told Gelek Rinpoche, I said, Buddha's a Christian now. Because ultimately the Adi Buddha that they keep talking about, that's just their name for the primal Buddha, which is Christ.
yeah.
Because that's it. That's the story. And so that's Osiris, that's Krishna, that's all these revealed teachings, the mysteries of Apollo that were celebrated, from the Hyperborean impulse, from the Northern European. Various cultures had a relationship to this Christ mystery, Zarathustrian with Ahura Mazda, the aura of the sun, that all these things there's pure streams that all lead up to this Christ mystery, and it all consolidates into the incarnation of the one-time incarnation. He's not going to come back and be president of, the United States of the world or what
Yeah,
have you. If somebody shows up like that, that's
that's
not
the
him.
Antichrist, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And in fact, that's what we're moving into, is that time where, just as Lucifer incarnated in China in the a few thousand years BC, so we're going to have Ahriman, or the spirit of materialism, the satanic being, incarnate in North America within our time frame or soon after. And so we're going to have the opportunity to show what we're made of, see. And it's supposed to happen. But what we're supposed to do is develop ourselves to be able to participate in that New Jerusalem, and not take the mark of the beast.
Yeah.
And we all know what that is, because it's like going on like gangbusters. I mean,
It's
do you
going on right
believe?
now.
Who could have? I mean, would you have said that we'd be in this predicament we're in right now just a mere 5, 7 years ago? I mean, things are accelerating, and it's
There's a funny meme. There's a funny meme, and it's like my parents at 30, and it's like it's like we have a baby, another one on the way, and they're looking at which house they want to buy. And then it's me at 30, and it's waking up and going, I can't believe another chapter of Revelations is happening. It's like, huh, I guess, but it is, man, and it's weird. And you get struck. I've interviewed Dr. Robert Malone, inventor of the mRNA vaccine, twice, who's on a crusade to get people to not take it. And that's why I was permanently banned from YouTube. And man, I mean, you start looking at it and you're like, your mind almost shuts down. You're like, this can't be it. And then it's right. You got to get this passport. You got to have this thing in order to go buy food, in order to drink, in order to participate in society. I mean,
well, there's worse things than death.
yeah, I'm
Okay.
gonna save myself.
Yeah.
Just trying to do
But,
this thing.
but I'm the one that's got to die when it's time for me to die. So let
Yes.
me live my life the way I want to. That
Yes.
was a
It,
thought
yeah.
that
It's, well,
Jimi
that's,
Hendrix,
yeah.
that's what he said. And I'm with him, and
Yeah. Well, that's my logic, is there are worse things than death. That was kind of a soul searching I had when realizing if I kept uploading these videos I was doing with these doctors, with these CIA officials after the election saying this thing was stolen, was like, hey, I can stay on YouTube and stop uploading these. But I really did view that as like a fate worse than death. I was like, I can't, whether it's something as little as that, or whether it's, screaming Valhalla and running into battle, there are just some things where you're like, if I do this, like a true part of my soul dies.
yeah,
If I'm, if my ancestors literally fought Nazis, but I can't upload a video from the inventor of the mRNA vaccine who's speaking out against this, if I can't speak truth to I don't have to storm a beach. I just have to press upload. If I can't press upload, then what am I? And
yeah.
so,
Well,
it,
and that's the beauty of it, because ultimately, it the heart forces are forces of courage. That's the lion. That's
yeah,
that will force. And so you go to the Gospel of the Lion, the Gospel of Mark, right? And what's the large amount of what's in the Gospel of Mark? It has to do with the healings that Christ did. There's all these miraculous healings, So it's actually participating in the world with ultimate courage. I mean, it's the purest example of courage you're going to find. And so that's that heart force. And years ago, with an associate from the we had the Waldorf teacher training program in Southfield here, and our bookstore was the largest outlet for Rudolf Steiner's work in North America. And so now the headquarters of Rudolf Steiner's Anthroposophical Societies in Ann Arbor. But I was working with Ralph Marinelli, who was one of the three heads of the Waldorf Teacher Training Program near here in Southfield. And we started working with the indications of Rudolf Steiner and studying them. He was the head of the tank factory here in Detroit,
Oh
and
shit.
the laboratory. Yeah. And so Rudolf Steiner said that the heart is not a pump. So we set about to prove scientifically, which we were able to do. And there's now published peer-reviewed papers, and there are people pursuing that line of thought. We weren't so presumptuous to say what it was and define it, but we proved absolutely completely that the heart is not a pump. It can't be. It's got a little thin tissue hinge at the bottom.
Yeah.
And we were able to discern the rotational movement of the heart and the rotational vortexing of the blood, that it's this dynamic event. And that's something that's a very liberating concept, see, because we have to get beyond this whole mechanical way of looking at the world. And the world of mechanics is very important for mechanical things, but it won't solve the mystery of life. And so you have to be able to go, when you get into the world of life, the world of the etheric, that the kind of mathematics that you're using to solve functions with a machine are insufficient to solve the principle of life, let alone to beyond that into the astral, where you have movement becomes a property in the animals. And so you have these different realms, and they have their own rules. They're not the same. But the modern monoculture that's developing, this scientism, is trying to bring everything under the control of the two-dimensional
The
view of
analytical
the world.
mind.
They
Yeah.
want to turn us into robots, for God's sake. I
Yeah.
mean, seriously.
Yeah.
So what is that? Well, that's that mechanical realm trying to find eternity. That's the realm of materiality, of Ahriman. And while we should keep it at bay, we have to respect that without it we wouldn't have a solid skeleton. But nonetheless, it's not to be the core of our being. The core of our being is that spirit of freedom and love that Rudolf Steiner talks about, that we've received as a gift from Christ. And because we can approach it through the Holy Spirit, through the grace of the Holy Spirit, we can do it as free beings rather than just be well-behaved robots.
Yeah. That's me in college trying to find the explanation for consciousness in a textbook. And it's like you can learn every protein folding and every dendrite and axon and every neurochemical. You're never going to find the explanation for this isness that I am. We're never going to break it down into just this is, we're never going to, there's not a money amount you hit when all of a sudden you go, oh, now I'm fulfilled. Right. It is liberating, that of the heart, because it's very symbolic of the mechanical. I have to do, I have to change, I bring about, I toil in the soil. I am bringing about the change in this world. It's on your shoulders. It's I have to do this. I have to work hard and elbow grease and get those neurons sweating, and you're gonna, we're gonna build the new Jerusalem. And it's very much so that physical mindset of, if we just do this, if we just bomb these people into submission, then we can. And it's like, no, it's a completely different. You're never going to understand 3 dimensions if you're living in the 2-dimensional world. There's just this certain, I can play my video games and then turn it off and then go eat a sandwich and do a podcast. The digital entities in the video game, they can't understand. Well, they're not real, so this is a weird analogy, but you get what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
sorry, yeah, it's yeah,
Life is not a series of subroutines,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And but and they come up with very sophisticated subroutines run through supercomputers, so they work on keywords that trigger events through their subroutines, and it's all very, very clever.
So very
And
impressive. Sure. Oh
yeah,
yeah.
sure, but that's not it.
Yeah.
You know,
There
and I
DARPA's
don't want
not
to
gonna
hurt their
fake.
feelings, but wait a minute, they don't have feelings.
Yeah, yeah. It's not. Yeah, it's you're right. It's all very impressive, right? DARPA inventing like a supercomputer modeled after the human brain, or NORAD under 2,000 feet of granite, watching every square inch of the earth. Like that's all very impressive, and I'm not going to try to take that away from them.
Well,
But
it's kind of funny. Like when I moved into where we're living now, about 6 years or so ago, I was talking to, around the time I was moving in, I was talking to this guy, and he's an engineer, and he says, "Yeah, I work for this company, and we do data storage systems." And I just, on intuition, said, "Oh, your biggest client's the NSA." He says, "Yeah, but they want to build a facility in Toronto." I said, "Well, don't you know they're international?"
yeah, yeah, it's no,
He
yeah,
worked for NetApp, and I just had an intuition that that was the company that was building these massive storage
yeah,
facilities. So what happened? So right around that time, like a week later, I'm moving into where I'm living now, and a 99-foot long black on black Chinook helicopter comes right up over my driveway as I'm moving into my house and sits there for about 10 minutes watching me move in. It's like, so we're here. Well, we know you're there, and I figured the guy who's flying the helicopter, he's probably a really nice guy. I'd love to have lunch with him.
sure,
It's like
sure. Oh yeah,
he's
it
just doing his job, and it's a bizarre system, but a lot of people they're out of fear,
yeah,
uh, the lack of courage that you brought to your life path. Uh, that's what's needed. That's the key to understanding the whole thing, and that's the Northern Mystery. That's that Northern Mystery it's a mystery of courage. At the Extern Stones in Paderborn, Germany, they had to walk across this precipice like on a tightrope, and if they fell, they'd die, right? And that was that point at which they had to reach that courage. That was that heart force, because that's really the presence of your personal ego, is the indwelling courage force of the heart, the lion force. And it's like in Wizard of Oz, it's the lion, right? The cowardly lion who
yeah,
all of a sudden finds his courage. And
yeah,
so it's all there. It's been around us. It's in the myths and legends, and these things are real. They're not just made up stuff to entertain kids because they don't know any better. That a lot of our path of development has been laid out for us in myths, fairy tales, legends, and that these things were encoded by initiates from earlier periods to be able to give us food for thought, and so it ultimately can serve as the artistic bridge into the understanding of the realm of the supersensible, because it's, if you try to just approach it just abstract thinking, well, and it's like with Leary. I got into this thing with him, and I said, okay, you have this whole model of neurology and the nervous system, and how these experiences in consciousness has to do with certain things, components of brain chemistry and all that. He said, okay, a few years ago, I was looking for a pencil, and I couldn't find it, and I knew I had it. It was in the band house. I was in a rock and roll band. We had a band house and all that, and jam with Peter Green and stuff like that. But I'm looking for this pencil, and I couldn't find it. And finally, in frustration, I went and sat down in this chair in the corner, and I popped right out of my body. And I was up on the ceiling looking down at the top of my head, and I saw the pencil behind the chair, down there with all the dust bunnies and all that. And then after being up there a minute or two, I popped back into my body, and then I got and looked down over the chair, and it was exactly the same thing I saw. It wasn't a hallucination. I was seeing 20/20 vision from the ceiling, and I know what the top of my head looks like, and I
yeah.
reached down and I got my pencil, and I was able to right when I was writing. I said, "Can you explain me with your neurological model of consciousness how that happened?" And he said, uh, "No."
Yeah, I mean,
Because he's an honest guy, and I always respected him for that, even though I disagree with him about drug culture as being a valid way of approaching it. I mean, it can open somebody to understand that the thing is possible, but these are things that you really need the development, because if you put a sun lamp into a flashlight, you'll burn it out. I mean, you really, without the orchestration of one's supersensible organs, it could be an unwholesome experience to have certain experiences come into you when you're not ready for them. So it's all about having it happen in the right way.
that's another brilliant quote, putting a sun lamp into a flashlight. You know, it's kind of like, going and visiting colleges in high school, see which one you want to go to. I remember visiting one with my mom, and it was like, you can't, yeah, if you got it all at once, it would be too overwhelming. It's like 18, Irish Catholic parents, private Catholic school, right? There's a certain strict lifestyle. And you go and you get to visit this college campus. And one, it's just larger than a high school campus. So, that's dramatic. The number of students, there's a lot more. So everything's dialed up. But then you also see frat houses and you see bars, and it's enough to entice you, right? It's enough. That's kind of like a psychedelic, right? It's enough to show you what's out there, but you can't just be thrown straight into it. I went and did it, and then I came back and I still had a couple months left of high school. And it's like the thoughts there, but you don't just throw it straight in there. It's a lot. And I remember I went to Valdosta State, which is a smaller college. And then my freshman year, I went and visited my friends from high school up at the University of Georgia, where I wanted to transfer. It was a better pre-med school. And it was kind of the same experience. I went up there for a weekend, an even bigger school, football team, and it's huge. And there's this whole nightlife. And it was like, it was so intense. And then I went back to Valdosta, and like I kept that in my mind. And I eventually did transfer to the University of Georgia. But it was this sort of like, you can get this glimpse of something and it's fantastic, but it's like you gotta come back down. You can't do it all at once. You don't, you teach a kid to swim with like, you know floaties on the arms and with mom and dad right there. You don't just take the baby and throw it off Niagara Falls. It's like, you can't do that, right? And in theory it sounds right. You're like, well, not in theory, don't throw babies off Niagara Falls, but like, yeah, just go all into it, right? Just give me God now, give it to me all. And it's like, not exactly, right? We dial, you dial it up slowly, and because you'll explode. And but it is this slow, this drip drip drip. This is a story I've told a million times on this podcast, but I lost my brother to suicide in 2014, and he was in Maryland, where I am right now. But at the time, I was down, and I'd been up in Maryland, but I had gone down to visit my girlfriend at the time in Georgia. So I was 500, and I calculated I was 599 miles away, right? And the night before, uh, my girlfriend was sleeping with her head on my chest, and she woke up. She woke she woke up because my heart was beating so hard that it woke her up from a dream. And she looked at me and saw I was sleeping and tossing and turning. She woke me up. So I was clearly having like a panic attack in my dream. But in my dream, like clear as day, I was like hovering over my brother's shoulder, almost like a drone, just kind of watching him. And he was in his room. And I watched everything unfold. And I know for a fact, and I always leave this part out just because it's family privacy, that I was watching in real time, retracing his steps, again, privacy, that I was watching what was happening. And this is from a pre-med, got into medical school, pat myself on the shoulder. I scored in the top 4 percentile in the MCAT. I published aquatic toxicology research. I got into some badass medical schools. I watched that, not on acid, not on dead sober, sleeping. You cannot explain that. 600 miles away. And it's not like he told me, hey, I'm committing suicide. No one does that because you would go and stop them. I experienced that. And to me, it's almost in a much darker version. But again, it's putting the sun lamp into the flashlight. It's that showed me something. And it's like, I don't claim, just like you with the heart, you're like, I don't claim to know what it is, but I know it's not this, it's like, this is this water or is this vodka? I don't claim to know what it is. It's probably one of the two. Maybe it's acetone, whatever some other clear liquids are. This is not milk. This is definitely not whiskey. This isn't orange juice. It's not orange. I don't claim to know what that was. But what I do know is it shattered my model, my existing model of reality. Because what was that? What was that? It's something, and I've interviewed tons of people who had similar experience, all science-minded guys. Dale Comstock, youngest ever member of Delta Force, who was also in the CIA. I mean, but he talks about these, and he's your all-American, never smoked pot in his life guy, but he talks about these experiences with some of like the most efficient Delta Force operators he knows in his life. They all talk about these weird experiences that just rips their model of the world apart. And I don't claim to know what it is, but to me, that's my evidence that no one can take that away from me. I know what I experienced. And it just showed me that the world is so much larger. You both show up at school at the same parking lot every day, and we all take the same highway, St. Pius in Atlanta. You take I-85, you get off the exit, and there it is. Well, one day, what if you're at school and the highway shut down, but your friends are still showing up to the parking lot? You don't know how they got there, but clearly there are other methods to get there. Clearly there are other roads that just because you don't know about them doesn't mean they don't exist. So I don't really know where I'm going with this whole thing, but there are these little drip, drip, drips of where, like, what the hell? You're not going to learn. I'm not going to learn about that in a biology textbook or with you and Leary talking about looking top down, or Dr. Evan Alexander, a literal Harvard neurosurgeon, in his book Proof of Heaven, talks about all these things. You're not going to learn, to me, but that is proof that there's just this three-dimensional physical reality we exist in is just one tiny little piece of like a much grander system. And I do this sometimes when I'm ranting. I don't remember where I started or why I started talking, but yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's good, and blessings on your brother.
Thank you.
Probably doing better than we are,
I firmly believe that. I firmly believe that.
But yeah, well, I'll give you just a very subtle example of that kind of thing because these things happen,
Sure.
premonitions,
Sure.
the remote viewing experience. I was with a friend of mine. He was my best buddy at the time, and I was going to meet his father and his father's new wife, and but I had a vision of this guy, and he in a plaid shirt reached in his pocket and pulled out, those reading glasses that are like a half of a glasses.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
hardly ever see them, right? I mean, but he pulled out and put on those kind of glasses. Well, like an hour later, who shows up but his dad and sits down. He's got a plaid shirt. He's sitting there with this woman, and my friend shows him uh, some book or something, and he reaches into his pocket and he pulls out those little
Super thin.
super thin profile glasses, that's when it really hit me. This is that little image that
Just
flashed in my mind like an hour and a half ago. So we have to be open to the possibility
yeah.
of that there is that realm in which things can come to us. Like when I change the channel on the radio, it's like I know what song it is, And it's just,
Yeah.
you know, how do I know what song it is and it hasn't even started yet? I push it and I know I can, in my head, that's going on, and then all of a sudden it chimes into it. It's the song that I thought it was going to be. And you know, it's not anything about me. I don't want to
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
it about
Yeah. Yeah.
me. It's just that it's because I work. I like to think I work with Georg Cantor talked about open set theory, and that so much of what people work with, they have a closed set because largely based on fear that when you live in a realm of closed sets and abstract thinking, that you really want to slay the unknown because it
It's
violates
bad.
your
It's
little
evil. Yeah.
experience that you finally got this little belief system that you dwell in and you feel safe, you know.
Yeah.
But when you get into open set theory, it's like there's things that are outside of your equation that you're not taking into consideration. And I assume, and that's why I always try to approach life as a unfolding series of questions, and
Yeah.
that answers, they're like static. They're dead. They're not growing. Life grows. It's continually in a metamorphosis. So that if you're working with closed sets, you're just going to miss out on so many components that are playing into the picture that you're unaware of, you know,
Yeah.
and that's kind of the way to look at it.
Yeah. If you live in, if you close the set and, you go, all right, well, we know we live on a flat earth. Well, there's only so many revelations. Like, if you think you live on a flat or quote unquote, know you do, sure, you could still technically look at, plant cells under a microscope. You could still do, you could still do tests on the combustion point of wood. Like, but there's a ceiling to what you can, you want to start looking up at like orbital mechanics or, uh, you know, stellar navigation, or you've closed yourself off from that. You can still do a lot of stuff, intercontinental ballistic missiles. Like, no, you gotta, you can't do that. You're in your own, and it's very comforting. I mean, who doesn't want to, when you finally build up a model of the universe that you think works, who doesn't want to stay in that? You're like, I've got it figured out. It's crazy enough that I'm a self-aware monkey on a rock floating around a nuclear explosion. If you kind of boil it down to like, you know, I wake up, I go to work, I eat this, I get lunch there, I come home and watch TV. Yeah, it's comforting and I completely get it. But that's what I had a very intelligent friend say to me once, actually not that long ago in 2021. But I was saying something about like YouTube censorship. And this was back when I was still on YouTube, like a moron. And I was like, well, they do censor a lot of, like, I know for a fact they do. I'll upload a video and in the first 2 minutes I'll get 100 views and then it will just stop. It'll just stop growing indefinitely. And I was like, but I feel like if I can get a certain number of views, I can break their censorship. And I was like, I think about it like a bucket with a smaller bucket inside of it, and I'm pouring water into the smaller bucket. I'm not seeing any water in the bigger bucket, but if I pour enough water into the smaller bucket, eventually it will overflow. And I remember he said, "Yeah, but what proof do you have that that model is accurate?"
Yeah.
And that's something as simple as talking about YouTube censorship that I've has stuck with me. It was probably like 6 months ago. I think about it almost every day. I'm like, so when I think about things, I'm like, well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And I'm like, do I even know that, some models I'm pretty sure of, like, I'm pretty sure this is going to fall down. All right. Yeah, it just fell down. But some like bigger things, you have these, well, I'm going to do this and I do that. And what goes around comes around. And what models am I basing this on?
Yeah.
What path am I, you know, am I,
Well, yeah,
yeah,
it's like I did this Twitter thread on Crown Gate where I did a mimetic storyboard of the Cabal and going all the way back with the relationship of the Queen's Privy Council, George Soros, and
mhm.
went through all the primary documents. And I would create a little image with a text, and then I'd put a link into a primary document. And I did this, and there's, ultimately, once I got to where I'd put enough in there, there was over a couple hundred different entries in the thread. it's parked still at the top of my Twitter account, John Barnwell 888. But in doing that, within the first 2 weeks, I got 2 million, close to 2,500,000 impressions. Okay, it
Jeez.
was just like to the
Yeah,
roof.
yeah,
And then chop. Now I get like, you know, two or three a week or whatever, but the cat was out of the bag because
yeah, yeah,
people were like, oh, wow, this is like real stuff. This isn't like theory. This is like, he says this, and I click here, and here's one of their documents telling
yeah,
you that this is what they're up to.
yeah,
And
right.
so I did my thing there, and but it's a perfect example. They just chopped me off. It was,
Yeah,
you know, within a month, boom, it's like
his ceiling.
crickets. You
It
know,
is.
it's crickets. It's like all of a sudden it was as if I didn't exist. And I know that people are still accessing it. It's just it's not registering in their system.
Yeah, and
You know,
it's.
they
I
don't want to
mean,
give me any help.
well, it's it's by design. They want you to think you're alone. They don't want you to think you're in numbers, right? So that's why do they just get rid of the dislike button on YouTube, right? It's because
Yeah, right.
they don't when a video comes out and it's the Pfizer CEO saying we need to start jabbing infants with this, thing that might destroy their heart, and there's it gets ratioed. There's 7 up likes and 200,000 dislikes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you got to disable that if you want to keep this scam going. You can't have this. You can't have a successful revolution of this. So yeah, when I would, I interviewed again, yeah, Dr. Robert Malone. That was episode 495. That went through the roof on my YouTube channel at the time, and then just hit a ceiling. I mean, like running into a steel barricade, just froze, and I was like, huh. I was like, what are the odds, obviously sarcastically, what are the odds that out of all my episodes, no one even by accident stumbled upon this? It just stayed at 2,899 views. Just incredible, incredible odds. And, but it's, to me, those are the actions of a desperate power system. So I
Yeah.
think
Well,
I
I'm
think
kind
it's
of
good. Yeah.
I'm kind of flattered by it because I'll look and
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll have like 86 views just after I did some little thing. And then I'll come back 10 minutes later and it'll say 77
Oh,
views.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
So they
That
gave
trick.
me a haircut,
Oh,
a
yeah. That trick.
9 view haircut.
That
It's like,
trick. Yeah.
don't they have anything better to do? Or what's is
Yeah,
the
it's just
algorithm bored or what?
it's oh yeah, no, I remember doing an interview about human trafficking and organ harvesting in China with some like experts on this topic. It was like the first minute, I think it hit 97 views. And I was like, I got a good one. And then it froze, and then it went back to like 80, and then just stayed there for a couple months. And I was like, I mean, is this really what we're doing? Right? You go and you see a Pfizer video and it's got 100,000 dislikes. You go back an hour later and it's got 110,000 dislikes. You go back the next day and it's got 90,000. You go back the
Yeah.
next day and it's got 200, and then it's back down to 80. And you're like, oh, I guess a lot of people just felt the need to come back and unpress that. But to me, it's, well, one, it's you take flack when you're over the target, right? But
Yep.
two, it's also these are the actions of a power structure that is rapidly losing power. If you're
We're
truly
desperate.
if you're truly in power, you don't need to get rid of the dislike button. What do I care? We run this thing. Let him get 10 trillion views on his Twitter post about the cabal. When you're truly in charge, you're not worried about that. You're not worried about saving. Why did Douglas MacArthur, after we dropped the second A bomb and he went over to Japan, why did he get off the plane and his aides asked him, they're like, you don't want a gun? And he goes, no. You walk out there with a gun. One, it's me and a bunch of Japanese. If they want to kill me, they're going to kill me. But two, we just nuked them into submission. If I get off of here without a gun, that's far more compelling that we're in control. You
Yeah.
get off and you walk it. That's what he did. Right after World War II, the most vicious
Well,
slaughter festival. He gets off, no gun on his hip, and
yeah.
that was power. When you're in
He,
control, you don't get rid of the dislike button.
yeah, he was the embodiment of that kind of courage. Him and
Yeah,
him and
Patton.
Patton both.
Yeah, yeah.
In one of my sales organizations for a nutrition sales organization I built, the guy who was driving the truck when Patton got T-boned and
Hmm.
killed was one of my
Assassinated.
people in my group, this old guy that I knew. But I don't know if you've heard this story, but when Patton tells the story about in World War One, where uh, he first encountered MacArthur, and he said he was out in the battlefield, and he looks, and there's all the caissons flying, bombs, people shooting, and there's MacArthur, and he's standing up in a vehicle, looking, just like as if he's out in the middle of a golf course. It's like that. It's impossible for him to get shot. Meanwhile, there's all this chaos
Yeah.
going on, and he's as if nothing's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And it's that spirit of destiny,
yeah.
that's remarkable. In fact, Patton himself, he believed himself to be the reincarnation of
Reincarnation.
Hannibal.
Uh-huh. Oh
Yeah,
yeah. When he
he,
used to go to those
he led
ancient,
the elephants to attack
yeah,
the Italian
Carthage.
peninsula.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
what when he was
It-
in Italy, he was
yeah,
walking around the
yeah,
ruins and the soldiers, and he was like, well, this is over here, and they're like, how do you know so much about the battle? And he turned around and looked at him and goes, I was there.
yeah,
There's
right.
no I've actually interviewed Patton's granddaughter, Helen
Oh,
Patton.
wow.
Oh, she's a
Yeah,
sweetheart. Um,
great.
but yeah, no, there are stories like that. Hold on, let me check because I got another guest in 10 minutes.
Yeah, I don't want to keep you.
No. I want to make sure that I'm still on with him. Because I would love to keep chatting with you, but I'm an idiot and I schedule tons of guests every day. Um, hold on. Let me just make sure you still come in. Um, but yeah, I've Black Hawk Down, right?
Yeah,
Well, I've interviewed that pilot twice, Mike Durant, who's now running for Senate actually. But
right.
he talks about in his book In the Company of Heroes, um, about when the two Delta Force operators showed up, uh, Gary Gordon and Randy Shugart. And, it's the middle of Mogadishu. The helicopter smashed. His back is broken. Everyone else in the chopper is dead. There's just bodies piled up around the city. And he says these two guys come down and he says they walk on up to the side of the helicopter as if, I think his words are, as if they're going for a Sunday stroll.
Yeah,
And he's like, boy, am I glad to see you guys. Like, I think my back's broken. Like, everyone else is dead. And he said they just kind of, he said they went and stood like 10 feet in front of the helicopter. I think they said one guy had his hands on his hips and the other was just kind of, and they were just pointing out lines of fire from where they were going to defend but he goes, as if they were just out on like a putting green,
yeah,
bullets, bodies everywhere. We've got a Black Hawk down. And they're just out there pointing there, pointing there. And it's just like the embodiment of like these guys are, and like they were killed that day. You almost have to imagine if there's just this level of destiny. Like they knew what they were doing. They were inserted. They knew there wasn't enough ammo to fight off the whole city, and they knew there was no quick reaction force on the way. But like MacArthur standing up, they just kind of went down there, checked their mags, and they're like, so we're gonna do that, we're gonna do that, and then we're gonna just cover that. And it's like just facing the jaws of death. And they just walked on down there, like, yeah, so this is what we're gonna do today. And there is that certain level of courage where it's destiny. You're like, this is what I'm doing, right? It's just this is
yeah.
the thing I'm doing.
Well, there's such a thing as a good death,
Oh yeah,
you know, and and
absolutely.
and to people have allowed themselves to surrender to being cowardly.
Yeah.
And one of the predicaments that we're in, or many of them, so many of them, has to do with the lack of that kind of courage in the politicians and all of that. They're afraid of being exposed for their corruption. I mean, they should be wearing NASCAR suits
Yeah,
with
with
all their
the
sponsors' labels all over it. I mean, those
yeah.
guys are as fake as the day is long, And so we're living in a world that is truly representative. Like what Ramdas, your hero guy, he said that government is a projection of the consciousness of the people.
Mm-hmm.
We got the government we've earned.
Oh yeah.
It's
Oh yeah.
we really have been lazy enough to deserve this kind of nonsense. And
Oh yeah. Oh
can I
yeah.
mention my books before
Oh yeah,
we
yeah,
end?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Well,
Please
I've
do.
written two books, and let's see, I got that right
Arcane of the
over
Grail
here.
Angel.
Here's the Arcana of the Grail Angel, and that's some 640 pages. And that's a study developed out of the work of Rudolf Steiner of the underground streams of esoteric Christianity, which flowed from the Brotherhood of the Holy Grail to the Knights Templar and the True Rosicrucian Order. And Douglas Gabriel wrote the foreword to that, and that's loaded with cosmological diagrams that I've reproduced the whole series in my second book, The Arcana of Light on the Path, plus added almost twice as many. And it lays out all this cosmology of which I've been talking about. And but these are available on eBay, and you can get them through there if you're in the continental US. If you're outside the US, we can work out something through PayPal, but you can contact me through my academia link, which if you go to my Twitter feed, you could find the academia link there, but it's at John Barnwell 888. And that'll enable you to get in contact with me and work out an arrangement, or you can private message me on Facebook. And that's a lot of work there, 640 pages of dense material. So it's not for the faint of heart. But if you really do want to proceed along these things, it's an invaluable tool, having the esoteric cosmology to be able to sort out all the various details. And it deals with the history of it and shows the metamorphosis of history of consciousness. And so it's invaluable. It's based on some diagrams that I found many years ago of Ehrenfried Pfeiffer, who was a direct student of Rudolf Steiner's, and I cribbed notes from that and developed that theme of study far beyond what I found in the diagrams. And so hopefully I get a lot of people that are very favorable to it. And so I just am trying to help people come to a level of thinking that's more capable of bringing them into the spiritual understanding.
And you said you have a podcast?
Yeah, I do a weekly podcast on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. They're all simulcast on that. And I do it with the Reverend David William Perry out of London, who's an interesting fellow. He's written several books, and we go back and forth. And part of the reason that it's an effective podcast is because we don't agree on a lot of things, and that's fine, you know.
Yeah.
And but I used to have a podcast with Leo Zagami. The Pew, it was with Reverend David, who does the podcast with me now. And there's Leo Zagami, who's frequently on InfoWars, and then Roseanne Barr, who everybody knows from television. And then there was Lowell Joseph Gallen from Jerusalem. And so a very diverse group, but that got taken down because, we tended to gravitate into subjects that these things are allowed but not permitted, and so
verboten.
That got destroyed. But I do monthly. I do a show with Douglas Gabriel, who's the one of the two principals of American intelligence media, Aim for Truth. And so that, I got a lot of things that I try to keep going. I just try to keep developing my understanding and sharing with as many people as I can. And I get nice feedback because I have people come back at me. I was lucky. When I was in junior high, the kid, we'd line up in gym class alphabetically, and the guy next to me alphabetically ended up becoming best friends, and he was like the nephew of the Polish ambassador to America, and but he one day turned to me and said, "Have you ever heard of Rudolf Steiner?" I was in the 7th grade, and I said, "No," and now look what happened.
Yeah.
But what if I lived in out in the middle of Canada, where I just sent the guy some books. They don't have any Steiner books in the town he lives in, but he's thankful to me that he has this new area of his life that he's working on now. So it's rewarding for me in that, knowing that I'm still able to help shed light on these things. And so that's a good thing. And I think that the spiritual world can find you if you just give it a chance. That's all. Christ is looking for us.
Yeah. Or as I think it was Timothy Leary. Was it him or Hunter S. Thompson? You don't find psychedelics, they find you.
Well, that's a way of looking at it, you
It's
know.
and psychedelics as a placeholder for spirituality or
Yeah, sure.
yeah. It's there. Again, it's a sunny day and you're inside. Like, sure, you're in an apartment with the blinds closed.
Yeah,
You can walk out the front door. It's right there. It
yeah,
is right there. You can find it. It's shining down on you.
yeah. No matter where you go, there you are.
Hold on 1 second. I think the guy is canceling. Um, I'm an idiot. I'll do this where I schedule a ton of podcasts, and then all of a sudden I'll meet someone like you, and we're having a great podcast, and I'm like, shit, I have to cut
Oh,
this
we can
one.
always do another one.
Oh no, I'd
I
love
have
to do
things,
another one. I just
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I have things that I have to attend to myself
Yeah,
here,
yeah. All right. Yeah,
and
don't worry about it.
but I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you.
Man, I love talking to you, man. That was as soon as you popped up wearing the CIA hat, I was like, oh hell yeah. Hell yeah, we're gonna go down the
Well,
rabbit hole.
watching your shows, I knew you had a sense of humor,
Yeah, good.
and I'm not CIA. My brother was. We never knew it until he retired, though.
Really?
Oh yeah, and he was in the military, and he was in my father's company, which is a CAD CAM, computer assisted design, computer
Uh-huh.
assisted machinery, and he was in that first. My brother was in that first wave of people that went to China after Nixon opened up China,
Oh.
and and I warned them all. I said, China's going to destroy the industry. You guys are, I don't know if you know what you're doing, but you're giving it
You're
away.
feeding the beast.
Yeah, and that's essentially what happened. Of
Yeah.
course, it's all a part of the great game machinations that come from the power brokers in
Yeah.
London, New York, and Rome, and
Yeah.
Washington.
Thucydides trap. Yeah, they don't this isn't an accident that they're feeding all this shit to China.
Yeah,
You want a good enemy.
I mean, we can never forget who was the ambassador to China.
Kissinger?
Yeah,
Lee
no,
Kissinger?
George Bush Sr.
Oh, even better.
You know,
Old Poppy. Poppy,
old
where
head of
where
old
were
head
you
of
when
the
JFK got
CIA.
whacked? Oh, I don't remember. Years later. Oh yeah, I was in Dallas.
Yeah,
How does that slip your mind?
right, exactly.
I know
So it's one of those things, and when you get into that picture of that surfaced of that was what's his name, Cruz's father, right?
yeah.
Ted Cruz's dad
Yeah.
was part of the CIA clique down there with uh, that whole thing. And the picture surfaced. A very good friend of mine, Marilyn Magruder Barnwell. She's the one who came up with that picture. Nobody knew that that's where it came from, but that's where it came from. Is a picture of them handing out leaflets on the street corner, and
Jesus.
it's like she's like her husband's a distant relative of my family, old Irish, I, Norman Irish family. It's like my family has been here. My father's side has been here since like what 1642, something like
Good Lord.
and but my mother's side, which is the great grandfather with the cathedrals and all that, he uh, he came over, in the early 20th century, and so that I have both sides of it going, and I love Ireland, but I think they've lost their way. I think
100%. The whole EU has. They're all yeah, it's they're demolishing that thing from with the inside and they're all
yeah, it's
it,
sad.
but you reap what you sow. I mean, it really is. Yeah, Ram Dass said that about Reagan. He was like, I think Reagan is a reaction to ourselves. He was like, we created him. It's so like these existing structures, they're so corrupt, they're evil, they're backwards. Like these things are just reflections of us.
Yeah,
We get what we deserve.
yeah,
And but Mr. Barnwell, I will let you go. I know you said you got to attend to some
It's a
things.
pleasure. I look forward to the next episode of whatever this is.
Tommy's podcast. It's yeah, man. I can't wait to chat again. That was fun as hell. I'll put your books in the description as well as because I did watch some of your earliest uploads on your YouTube channel last night. There was one line that I wanted to touch on, but I clearly forgot, and it was you talking about the Library of Alexandria, and the interviewer asked you, where would we be if it wasn't destroyed? And it's the only time I've ever heard the answer. We'd probably be in a worse spot if the Library of Alexandria didn't burn down. And that I was like, I've never heard that answer before. I thought it was awesome.
Think of it. Because we don't have the maturity to deal with the things that we're dealing with right now. I mean, it's obvious that it's that whole thing. If you go back to like Fantasia, with the brooms, and Mickey Mouse is doing the spells, and he gets the broom to do the chores.
Yeah.
Before you know it, there's thousands of brooms, and the brooms are taking over. Well, that's kind of like what we're looking at here. They got all these robots. So we're going to let the robots have the world? They won't even enjoy it.
Yeah. Fuck yeah. If you can't tell, I know I swear a lot, and I think I reeled it in this episode. I try to keep my French at a minimum. Mr. Barnwell, thank you so much, man. I had an absolute
I'll send you some of my particulars so you can add them to the whatever.
Please do. Yeah, no. So yeah, put it in the email, and I'll put it in the description of you can write out whatever you want. I'll just copy and paste it. I can't wait to the next talk. I have that note about the Hopis and the two paths, and yeah, man, it was an absolute pleasure. It was a gift to meet you. Thank you so much for coming on here.
Thank you so much.
All right, man. Take care, buddy. Peace.